My son said I was too old, too slow, and too much of a burden. He said it with the casual cruelty of someone who thought love was owed but respect was optional. And that was the moment I realized he wasn't just disappointed in me, he was ready to erase me. Without consent, without hesitation, he put me in a nursing home and moved into my house like I had vanished, like my life was already a memory he could sweep aside. But I wasn't done. I wasn't fragile. I wasn't defeated. I was furious. And I was planning for a lesson he'd never forget. A lesson that wouldn't come from shouting or rage, but from quiet, unyielding precision. Jason had always been the center of my universe. After my husband passed, it was just him and me. I scrubbed floors until my hands bled, skipped meals when money ran thin, pawned my wedding ring to buy his first suit for graduation, and I did it without complaint, without expectation. Love, I believed, was enough. But I was naive. Love isn't always enough when greed hides behind a familiar face. When I fainted that Tuesday morning, it wasn't because I was frail or incapable. It was simply exhaustion. But to him and his wife, Danielle, it became an opportunity. They swept in with feigned concern, offered soup and assistance, and whispered about lawyers and paperwork as if I had already ceased to exist. I sat in that beige, sterile room, surrounded by plastic flowers and unfamiliar furniture, staring at the walls and feeling the weight of betrayal. My name had been signed away, my accounts frozen, locks changed. The nursing home staff were polite but distant, treating me like a problem rather than a person. I felt rage bubbling under my ribs, quiet, controlled waiting. And then the clarity came. They thought I was powerless. They thought I would wither, but I wasn't powerless. I wasn't fading. I was alive, and I would take everything back. Not just the house, not just the money, but my dignity and my peace. I started by documenting everything. Names, dates, transactions, documents, small details that would seem insignificant to the untrained eye but were crucial. My lawyer, Monica Reeves, hadn't heard from me in years, but she was still on retainer. I contacted her, every word deliberate, every detail precise. When she arrived, she didn't see a frail, confused woman. She saw a storm contained in human form. The forged power of attorney was challenged. The accounts were unlocked. And suddenly, the world shifted. Jason thought he had won. He hadn't even realized he was still playing on my board. Reclaiming the house wasn't about money. It was about presence. It was like the reminder that I existed, and I existed with intention. Monica helped me file the petitions for a partition sale. He received the papers earlier one morning, and Daniel shrieked of disbelief carried across the street like a warning bell. Jason turned pale, slammed doors, but I didn't need to witness it. Knowing was enough. It was poetic. They had underestimated the quietest woman in the room, and now they were learning what happens when silence isn't submission. I watched them scramble, watched the air around their stolen peace become chaotic, and I waited, deliberately. I bought the house next door. No mortgage, paid in full. A simple structure, a rose bush at the front, a black porch with perfect view in their living room. My grandson Tyler didn't know yet. This was mine, a statement, a victory, a lesson carved into reality. On the first day, I sat on the porch in my Sunday hat, sipping sweet tea, watching as Jason discovered the full weight of my patience. He froze, uncertain, caught between rage and disbelief. Danielle, blinded by pride and humiliation, threw curtains and parked as far away as possible. I started my slow reclamation. Roses along the fence, red attire, conversations with neighbors ignored by Jason. Banana red for the family I had restored in my old home. Tyler came often, eyes wide with understanding, slowly realizing the depth of their betrayal. One afternoon, he said softly, "Why buy the house next door?" I smiled. "So your father could see the consequences every day." He laughed, shocked, but it wasn't cruel. It was just the clarity of truth hitting young eyes for the first time. Life settled into a rhythm. Jason's presence became sporadic. Lights flickered late at night, conversations muffled, glances stolen. Danielle tried to mask her obsession with absurd social gatherings, but I ignored it. I didn't need to engage. Every rose I planted, every Tyler visit made, every moment of peace I reclaimed was a stone in the foundation of my victory. I wasn't seeking revenge for spectacle. I was reclaiming reality. A quiet, deliberate justice that left no room for denial. Tyler thrived. Grades improved, curiosity blossomed. He helped in the garden, listened to stories of his grandfather, and asked questions that Jason had never answered. Together, we laid the foundation for something stronger than vengeance. Restoration. And I began to see it clearly. Revenge without purpose is just bitterness. Redemption for my family, for my grandson, or the women I knew had been discarded like me became the real work. I made donations to local programs, supporting elderly women in crisis, ensuring that my own battle became a blueprint for others. My story, now documented in journals and legal victories, became a beacon. Every silent smile I shared with haters, every word Tyler absorbed, every rose blooming in my garden was a text in it. You cannot erase a life built on love and resilience, no matter how quietly you try. Jason approached eventually, hesitant, remorseful, a shadow of the man who once thought control was power. I didn't invite him in. I didn't engage in argument or apology. I let him feel the consequences of his choices, the weight of every stolen hour and every hidden deed. Words were unnecessary. Silence present, an unwavering boundary spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. I reclaimed my life fully. When the house sold to a young couple who cherished it, who saw the care and love that had been poured into every corner. The money secured tightly to fight for set up a trust and funded community programs that would protect others from betrayal and exploitation. Jason got nothing. No money, no house, no legacy, and I didn't just survive, I flourished. Every morning, the sun rose over a garden of my making, a life reclaimed, brick by brick, moment by moment.
Weeks passed, and life settled into a rhythm that Jason and Danielle couldn't infiltrate. Tyler thrived at my side, and I thrived in reclaiming a life they thought they'd buried. But revenge, real revenge, isn't just about getting even. It's about building a life so untouchable, so whole, that the people who tried to break you can only watch in silent frustration. I spent my mornings tending roses along the fence, my afternoons in the kitchen perfecting recipes that had long been Jason's favorites, and my evenings with Tyler, teaching him everything I knew about patience, strategy, and integrity. Tyler was quick to understand that I wasn't punishing his father for spectacle. Every careful decision, every legal maneuver, every subtle psychological move had purpose. He watched me not with fear, but with curiosity, and sometimes admiration. "Grandma," he asked one afternoon, "why didn't you just yell at him?" I poured him a glass of iced tea and smiled. "Because yelling doesn't change hearts, baby. It doesn't make people see truth. You do that quietly. You do it deliberately. And when they see what they lost, it hurts them more than a scream ever could." I started documenting everything again. This time not for legal reasons, but for history. I wrote every nuance of my journey, the betrayal, the quiet plotting, the steps I took to regain control. Names, dates, conversations, small details that others might forget. They were all inked into notebooks I stacked on my desk. I wanted a record not just for Tyler, but for every woman who would read it one day and realize they were not powerless, that even in silence there is strength. Jason's attempts to reclaim his dignity were pitiful, and I watched from my porch, a quiet observer of the chaos he'd brought upon himself. He tried to speak through notes, through emails, through occasional knocks, but I didn't answer. Danielle tried to maintain control with her social displays, inviting neighbors over, hosting brunches, playing loud music late into the night, but it never penetrated my world. I wasn't just living next door, I was thriving, and they were reminded every day of the mistake they had made. One evening, I noticed a small change in Jason. He began pacing inside the living room, muttering under his breath, speaking to himself in a low, frustrated tone. Tyler noticed too and whispered, "Grandma, he's starting to break." I nodded, smiling quietly. It wasn't cruelty, it was justice. He had stolen from me, attempted to erase me, and now he was left with the hollow echo of his own actions. Sometimes I would catch him staring across the fence, eyes meeting mine, but he didn't dare cross the line. He had learned that boundaries weren't optional with me. The house I had sold to the young couple flourished in its new hands. They wrote me letters of thanks, telling me how much love they felt as they walked through rooms I had once maintained with my own hands. Tyler and I baked cookies for them, took overgrown plants from our garden to brighten their porch, and sometimes, just to remind ourselves, we'd walk through the old hallways with no furniture, imagining the echoes of a life lived fully. Every brick, every rose, every memory became a symbol. Resilience isn't loud, it's persistent. If the week turned into months, I focused on Tyler's growth. We planted miracles, tomatoes, and herbs. Discussing more than just gardening, we discussed history, character, and integrity. Tyler began understanding the difference between vengeance and justice, between bitterness and restoration. One afternoon, while planting sunflowers, he looked up at me and asked, "Grandma, will Dad ever understand what he did?" I paused, wiping dirt from my hands, and answered carefully, "Some people never understand. Some people never want to. But understanding isn't necessary for us to reclaim our lives. What matters is that you and I remember the truth and act accordingly." Tyler's perspective was growing sharper, wise in his years. He began helping me with neighbors, volunteering at community centers, assisting the elderly with chores and errands. We were building a network, a quiet army of influence, kindness, and awareness. Each act of help reinforced the lesson Jason had tried to erase. Strength is not dominance, but in compassion and consistency. Jason's presence became even more ghostly over time. Danielle tried to maintain appearances, but the truth is never as quiet as silence when it has nothing left to hide behind. We never gossiped, we never confronted aggressively. We simply lived deliberately, thriving and leaving a trail of integrity and joy that their duplicity couldn't penetrate. One morning, Tyler asked, "Grandma, will he ever come back?" I considered this, watching the sun rise over our garden. I said, "Maybe. But if he does, he'll find boundaries he can't cross and consequences he can't control. And that's all anyone needs to know. Some lessons are learned not through words, but through the life you build beyond them." And so we did. We built. We thrived. Every morning the sun arose over roses, tomatoes, and herbs, thriving lives. Every evening Tyler and I shared stories, laughter, and quiet reflection. Every week letter from women in need reminded me that the fight wasn't just ours, but theirs too. Every small victory, every careful decision was a reminder that power doesn't come from aggression. It comes from clarity, strategy, an unwavering commitment to one's own truth.
Months slipped into years, and our life next door to Jason and Danielle became an anchor of stability and quiet triumph. Tyler flourished, his laughter filling our home in ways that reminded me of every sacrifice I'd made raising Jason. Each day, he grew into a young man of integrity, intelligence, and kindness, a living testament that love and guidance endure, even when betrayal strikes. I often reflected on my past, tracing the journey from the kitchen floor where I fainted to this front porch where I now sip tea. Roses in bloom, tomatoes sprouting in neat rows. Every decision I had made, every notebook filled with details, every consultation with Monica, it all culminated in the life I had reclaimed. But more than that, it was a life that radiated proof to anyone who doubted me. You can take my possessions, my home, my perceived control over life, but you cannot take my will. Tyler and I continued our work with the Mayfield Legacy Project. It grows slowly at first, a handful of volunteers, modest donations. But word spread. Women who had been silenced, forgotten, and discarded began finding us. They shared stories that mirrored mine. Adult children exploiting their trust, partners manipulating their assets, communities dismissing their existence. And slowly, we built a network of knowledge, resources, and protection. It wasn't just about financial guidance or legal support. It was about instilling confidence and reminding women that their lives mattered no matter what anyone else said. One afternoon, Tyler asked, "Grandma, do you think Dad will ever see what he lost?" I paused, considering. I said he might. But seeing isn't the same as understanding. People like him rarely internalize the lessons they are taught by loss. They only feel the absence, never the gift of what was. Tyler frowned slightly. "Does that make you sad?" I shook my head. "No, baby. It makes me grateful. Grateful for clarity, for peace, and for the life we're building now. Sadness only comes from attachment to outcomes beyond your control." I'd let that go. Despite my distance, Jason occasionally tried to breach it, sending notes or leaving small gestures outside the fence. Tyler and I never engaged. Every intrusion, every attempt to reclaim control was met with calm observation. Silence with our most effective shield. Danielle moved out eventually, retreating to Texas, leaving Jason behind in the house he no longer owned the authority to manage as he wished. The neighborhood watched in quiet fascination as the house grew empty, the energy of false pride and showmanship dissipating into nothing. Tyler thrived in school, joining the Youth Barton Club, excelling in academics, and building friendships rooted in authenticity. He started mentoring younger children, teaching them about patience and responsibility. And in quiet moments, he would sit with me on the porch, sharing observations about life and people. Grandma said he would say, "I think people like that don't understand patience or consequences. They think they can bulldoze life and everything bends to their will, but it doesn't." I smiled, ruffling his hair. That's why we build. That's why we stay deliberate. Patience isn't passive. It's the most powerful form of action because it endures beyond their impulsive control. One spring morning, I received a letter from Monica Reeves, stamped and sealed in her crisp professional envelope. Inside was the finalized estate plan. Tyler would inherit the house once he turned 21, with a trust to cover his education and living expenses. Every other asset, every ounce of wealth I had accumulated was allocated to the Mayfield Legacy Grant, ensuring that women in crisis would never feel the helplessness I had felt during my darkest moments. Jason received nothing. He wasn't just denied access to my wealth, he was denied influence, denied proximity, denied the ability to manipulate or harm further. Justice, delivered silently and decisively, had reached its conclusion. Tyler looked over my shoulder as I read the letter aloud. "Grandma," he whispered, eyes wide, "you did all this even for me?" I nodded, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Not just for you, baby. For every child and every woman who deserved a second chance. For every life they tried to diminish. You'll learn one day. how much power there is in reclaiming what's rightfully yours. Life beyond Jason and Danielle became a sanctuary. Every morning I greeted neighbors, exchanged small gestures of kindness, and tended to the garden with the same meticulous care I had once given to my home, to my son, to every task I had been expected to shoulder alone. Tyler and I laughed often, played cards, baked, and painted. I even began holding small art classes for neighborhood children and teens, sharing creativity as both expression and therapy. Our presence became a beacon of continuity, resilience, and the quiet joy of life reclaimed. Then one day, Jason came to the porch. He stood at the edge of the gate, hesitant, exhausted, and undoubtedly on Humboldt. I met him with calm composure. "Jason," I said softly, "do you understand now?" He swallowed, eyes brimming with unspoken guilt. I think so, Mom. I thought I was hoping. His voice faltered. I shook my head. "You didn't help. You erased. You assumed. You stole what wasn't yours. And now the life you tried to claim has grown without you. You've been given the chance to witness it, not to control it." He nodded slowly, a small trembled comprehension of it. "I was scared," he admitted. "I didn't want to lose everything. I didn't know how to handle it." I leaned back in my chair, letting the truth settle between us. Fear is no excuse for betrayal, Jason. But understanding it, confronting it, and choosing differently in the future, that's the opportunity for redemption. Tyler, observing quietly from the porch swing, smiled softly. "Grandma, maybe he's starting to get it." I nodded. Maybe. But his redemption isn't my responsibility. Our responsibility is to live with integrity, to protect what matters, and to build a life beyond the reach of those who would harm it. The days that followed were calm, purposeful, and filled with growth. Tyler's confidence blossomed. Our Mayfield Legacy Project expanded. Women came to us seeking advice, legal counsel, and reassurance. They found strength in the quiet assurance that even after betrayal, there is agency, there is law, and there is life beyond manipulation. We held seminars, workshops, and informal gatherings to discuss elder justice, financial literacy, and personal sovereignty. One afternoon, while planting new roses along the fence, Tyler looked at me and asked, "Grandma, what's the most important thing you learned through all of this?" I paused, brushing soil from my hands, letting the afternoon sun warm my face. "That peace isn't given, Tyler. Peace is reclaimed. It's deliberate, intentional, and oftentimes quiet. It comes from boundaries, from self-respect, from truth, and it's stronger than anger, stronger than vengeance, stronger than anyone who tries to erase you." Tyler nodded, understanding for me on his 14 years. "So living well, that's revenge?" I smiled, shaking my head. "No, maybe. Living well isn't revenge. It's reclamation. Revenge is fleeting. Living well endures. It teaches, it strengthens, it inspires. And the people who hurt you, they were left to witness it, powerless because life isn't about them anymore." Jason eventually faded from the neighborhood, his attempts to reconcile never fully materializing. Danielle remained distant, her voice and influence absent. Tyler and I, surrounded by our flourishing garden, our growing network, and the echoed with resilience, had reclaimed not just property or legal rights, but the very essence of dignity and purpose. Years later,
Kyler would inherit the house, the trust, and the lessons inscribed in our shared life. The Mayfield Legacy Project continued, supporting countless women who had faced betrayal and isolation. And I, sitting on my porch with tea in hand, watched the gardens flourish, the roses bloom, and the sun cast long golden shadows across a life meticulously reclaimed. I never needed Jason's apology, Danielle's recognition, or the validation of anyone who had once thought me weak. Peace had been restored. Life had been reclaimed, and the story